Corporal Justin McLeod was a high school baseball star from St. Louis with multiple scholarships to play college ball, but he enlisted because of 9/11. By the time I was his platoon commander in the fall of 2010, he had reached the end of his service contract and was debating whether or not he'd extend for our deployment. He'd also just had a son. I told him we really needed him, but ultimately to talk to his wife and let me know. He came back a few days later and said, "Sir, I can't leave you guys. You're my family too." 2 months later, in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, an improvised explosive device ripped Corporal McLeod to pieces. McLeod was flatlining, and I needed to convey to him that we needed him to stay, we needed him to fight, and I had the most difficult conversation of my life. I told him that his son Desmond expected him to make it back, and that he needed to be there for Desmond's first Little League baseball game. Something clicked, and McLeod began to fight. 10 years later, just a few minutes after putting my 2-year-old daughter to bed, I received a call that Justin finally lost the battle that he'd been fighting from the moment he was medically evacuated from the war. That evening, I understood that it was my duty to call my Marines and to call his mother. Tragically, within the next 30 days, 2 more of my Marines would commit suicide. It was only April, and I had lost 3 Marines to suicide in 2020. I'm a Marine, and Marines are trained to win battles, and we were losing. So I started my research, and I read dozens of VA suicide reports, and what I kept finding is that the leading proximal cause of veteran suicide are feelings of disconnectedness and isolation. I looked for resources or organizations that connected veterans. What I found was an overwhelming amount of support for our special forces and wounded service members, which to me made sense that we prioritize these men and women. But the data from the VA suicide report indicated that non-combat veterans are nearly twice as likely to commit suicide, and that there's no clear correlation between combat and suicide. So why are 98% of the resources allocated to 2% of the population when the data tells us that every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine needs to feel connected? The bonds forged when you're part of a tribe with such a tremendous purpose are really incommunicable to anyone who hasn't experienced it. Unfortunately, there aren't resources available to your average veteran. The organizations and resources out there always have some type of barrier to entry. Admittance into these organizations requires an individual to meet a narrow criteria. If a veteran can't check enough boxes, they're excluded. But what if an organization existed where your service was the only requirement?